It is strange how time can turn even the strongest men into silhouettes of memories. How the world keeps moving forward while the people we once considered invincible quietly drift into the shadows. Today, at 78, Arnold Schwarzenegger stands at the edge of a life that once felt too enormous for any single man to carry. Yet now feels unbearably heavy in ways no one could have imagined. There is something unsettling in the way he pauses before speaking these days, something unsaid lingering behind his eyes, something fragile beneath the iron frame the world believed would never bend. For decades, he was the embodiment of power, an unbreakable force who refused to be defined by failure, who transformed every hardship into an empire of triumph. But now, as the lights fade from the stages he once dominated, a quieter truth follows him everywhere he goes, whispering through the hallways of his home, echoing through old photographs, haunting the memories he tries not to revisit. People still see the legend. But very few see the man who wakes each morning with a silence that feels colder than it used to. Very few see how the world he built, piece by piece, muscle by muscle, mile by mile, has begun shifting beneath him in ways that no one warned him about. Very few understand why, behind the smiles he still offers the public, there is an ache that refuses to disappear. And most heartbreaking of all, very few know the truth of what his life has become at 78. He doesn't talk about it openly. He doesn't want pity. He doesn't want cameras capturing the parts of him that feel too human, too vulnerable, too real. But the tragedy is there, quiet, heavy, and impossible to ignore once you see it. What happened to Arnold Schwarzenegger is not what the world expected. And by the end of this journey, you will understand why. Long before the world knew his name, long before he stood beneath the blinding lights of Mr. Olympia stages or walked across red carpets with the confidence of a king, Arnold Schwarzenegger was just a skinny boy from a village so small that many maps didn't even bother to mark it. Thal, Austria, quiet, rural, and steeped in post-war hardship, was not a place where dreams thrived easily. It was a place where days were long, winters were cold, and survival demanded more strength than most children could carry. Arnold grew up in a house that held more discipline than warmth. His father, Gustav Schwarzenegger, a strict local police chief and former soldier, believed in rigid order and unshakable obedience. In that house, emotions had little room to breathe. Praise was rare, mistakes were not tolerated, and love, at least the soft kind, did not flow freely. Arnold has spoken openly about these early years, describing a childhood shaped by stern expectations and a lingering sense of inadequacy. He wanted approval, wanted recognition, wanted to feel seen, yet often walked away feeling invisible. But somewhere inside that quiet, conflicted boy lived something else. An ember. A restlessness. A hunger for life far beyond the hills surrounding Thal. It began with a magazine. Arnold was around 13 when he flipped through the pages of a bodybuilding publication and saw a photograph that would change everything. Reg Park, the muscle-bound champion who played Hercules. In that moment, the world shifted. Here was a man sculpted like a myth, a man who turned strength into a kind of art. Arnold had never seen anything like it. And deep inside, the ember flared. He wanted that. He wanted to be powerful. He wanted to rise so high that no one could ever overlook him again. At 14, he made a decision most boys his age could never imagine. He would become the greatest bodybuilder in the world. Not good. Not strong. Not better than the boys in his village. He wanted to be the greatest ever. But Thal was not a place where greatness grew easily. Dumbbells were scarce. Gym access was limited. Yet Arnold trained anyway, lifting logs behind his house, doing endless push-ups on cold wooden floors, improvising weights with whatever heavy objects he could find. His determination was so fierce that neighbors would occasionally glimpse him running up hills carrying a bicycle on his shoulders simply because he needed resistance. At school, he felt like an outsider, too ambitious, too imaginative, too unwilling to settle for the life everyone expected him to inherit. But that ambition, that burning desire to escape, was not something anyone could extinguish. When he turned 18, he joined the Austrian army, not by choice, but by obligation, mandatory service. Yet even there, he found a way to chase his dream. During training, he secretly left his base to compete in a bodybuilding contest, an act that landed him in military jail for a week. But when he returned with the title of Junior Mr. Europe, everything changed. His superiors, once disappointed, now recognized his potential and allowed him to train more seriously. For the first time, someone believed in him. The victory was small on paper, but monumental in Arnold's life. It was proof that the world he imagined for himself wasn't just fantasy. It was possible. It was real. And he was capable of achieving it. But what he could not yet see, what no one could see, was the unimaginable journey that lay ahead, the triumphs he would seize, the empire he would build, and the silent wounds he would one day carry. The boy from Thal had taken his first step toward greatness. But the path he was choosing would lead him to both unimaginable glory and heartbreak he never knew awaited him at the end. Leaving Austria behind was not just a decision for Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was a declaration to the world that he would no longer be confined by the expectations of a small village or the weight of a heavy childhood. He understood early that greatness required sacrifice, and he was willing to offer every piece of himself to claim the life he envisioned. After his success in the Junior Mr. Europe competition, Arnold realized that bodybuilding was no longer a hobby or an escape. It was his destiny. He devoted himself to the sport with a discipline that bordered on obsession, pushing beyond what anyone around him believed was humanly possible. When others were sleeping, Arnold was training. When others took breaks, he added another set. He studied the physiques of champions, read books on anatomy, and analyzed every muscle group with the precision of a surgeon. His training routine became legendary even before the world knew his name. He would train twice a day, 6 hours in total, sculpting each part of his body with relentless focus. People who met him during those years often mentioned that he seemed fueled by a force bigger than ambition, a hunger to prove that he could become the greatest bodybuilder the world had ever seen. At 19, he traveled alone to Munich to join a real gym with real equipment and real competitors. It was there that he transformed from a promising young athlete into a force the bodybuilding world could no longer ignore. He entered every competition available, often training through pain and fatigue, and rarely allowing himself moments of celebration. Each trophy he won was not just an achievement, it was a step closer to the future he saw so clearly. In 1967, at the age of 20, Arnold became the youngest man ever to win the prestigious Mr. Universe title. The moment his name was announced, he felt something shift inside him. It was not just victory, it was validation. Everything he had endured, the discipline, the loneliness, the sacrifices, had led him to this defining moment. Winning Mr. Universe was a milestone, but for Arnold, it was merely a preview of what he intended to become. He wanted more titles, more challenges, and more stages on which to prove that discipline and willpower could turn even the most unlikely boy into a legend. Arnold carried with him a mindset unlike anything the sport had ever seen. He believed in the power of visualization, imagining his future in vivid detail long before it arrived. He convinced his body to follow the path his mind had already created. This clarity, this unshakable sense of direction, became the foundation of his rise. As he stood on that stage with the Mr. Universe trophy in his hands, he understood that this victory was only the beginning. The real journey, the one that would take him across continents and transform him into an icon, was just beginning. When Arnold arrived in America in 1968, he stepped into a world he had only dreamed about. He spoke little English, carried very little money, and knew almost no one, but he had the confidence of a man who believed that nothing could stop him. He trained at Gold's Gym in Venice, California, where the world's strongest and most dedicated athletes gathered. Even in that elite environment, Arnold stood out immediately. His size, symmetry, and charisma were unlike anything the bodybuilding community had ever witnessed. Within a few years, he began dominating the sport with a consistency that felt almost impossible. He won his first Mr. Olympia title in 1970, becoming the youngest champion in history. But Arnold did not stop at winning, he transformed the very foundation of bodybuilding. He brought style, showmanship, and personality to a sport previously seen as niche and misunderstood. He learned how to pose in ways that turned the body into a work of art, blending strength with elegance and performance with precision. Arnold also understood the importance of relationships, building genuine rivalries and friendships that elevated the sport rather than dividing it. His dynamic with fellow bodybuilder Lou Ferrigno, famously showcased in the documentary Pumping Iron, brought unprecedented attention to bodybuilding. For the first time, audiences were not just watching men flex on a stage, they were witnessing stories, struggles, and dreams that felt relatable and inspiring. He went on to win Mr. Olympia 6 consecutive times from 1970 to 1975, each victory solidifying his role as the face of bodybuilding. He stepped away from competition in 1975 but stunned the world years later when he returned in 1980 and claimed the title once again. This comeback victory remains one of the most debated and iconic moments in the sport's history, proving that Arnold's dominance was not a temporary era, it was a revolution. By the end of the 1970s, bodybuilding was no longer an underground pursuit. It was a thriving global phenomenon fueled by Arnold's personality, discipline, and vision. Gyms around the world were expanding, fitness magazines were selling out, and young athletes everywhere believed they could transform their lives through strength. Arnold had taken a sport that few understood and turned it into a cultural movement. He had arrived in America as a stranger, but within a decade, he had reshaped the fitness landscape across the world. While the bodybuilding world saw Arnold as unbeatable, Hollywood saw him as something far less promising. Casting agents often dismissed him because of his thick accent, massive physique, and unusual last name. Many believed he would never fit into the polished world of American cinema. But Arnold, as always, refused to accept limitations placed on him by others. If anything, skepticism only fueled his determination. He took acting classes, worked tirelessly on improving his English, and approached the industry with the same discipline that had made him a champion. His perseverance paid off when he landed the role of Hercules in New York, 1969. Though the film itself was not a hit, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in Arnold's life. Each small role that followed, whether in film or television, gave him another opportunity to learn, refine his craft, and push closer to the dream he refused to abandon. His breakthrough came with Conan the Barbarian in 1982. The role suited him perfectly: powerful, silent, intense, and unforgettable. Audiences were drawn to his physical presence and unique screen energy, and Hollywood finally realized that Arnold was not a misfit, he was a new kind of star. The success of Conan led him straight to the film that would forever redefine his career, The Terminator, 1984. With his chilling performance as the relentless cyborg assassin, Arnold became an international sensation. The movie transformed him from a former bodybuilder trying to break into Hollywood into a global icon whose image could headline blockbusters for decades. Critics who once doubted him now praised his screen presence, and directors recognized his ability to command audiences like few others could. Arnold's ascent in Hollywood was not accidental. It was the result of relentless work, unwavering focus, and a refusal to accept failure. He proved that the impossible dream he carried from Austria was not only achievable, it was inevitable. Every rejection, every criticism, every barrier placed in his path became another reason to push harder. By the mid-1980s, the world no longer saw Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Austrian newcomer with an accent and a dream. They saw him as a superstar with a forceful presence, an unmatched work ethic, and a determination that transcended every obstacle he encountered. Hollywood had become his second arena, and just like bodybuilding, he dominated it completely. By the time Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped fully into Hollywood, the world had already begun to sense that there was something extraordinary about him. He had achieved greatness as a bodybuilder and earned respect as a determined newcomer, but now he was standing at the threshold of an entirely new identity: the rise of an action hero unlike anything cinema had ever seen. Hollywood was shifting, audiences were changing, and the industry needed a fresh symbol of strength, courage, and unstoppable power. Arnold became the answer without even trying to be anything other than himself. After the success of Conan the Barbarian, he found himself in the perfect position to become a dominant force in the action genre. Conan had proven that his incredible physical presence could command a film, but it also revealed something deeper. Arnold was not merely a strongman playing a role, he carried a natural charisma that pulled audiences into the story without effort. The camera loved him, and more importantly, viewers believed him. They believed his intensity, his raw power, and the determination he carried in every scene. Then came The Terminator, a film that would permanently alter the course of his career and Hollywood itself. James Cameron's vision collided with Arnold's presence in a way that felt fated. The role of the Terminator, originally intended for someone else, became iconic because Arnold brought an eerie stillness and mechanical precision that no other actor could have delivered. Every line he spoke carried weight, every movement felt calculated, and every moment pushed him deeper into cinematic history. His famous line, "I'll be back," became one of the most recognizable quotes in all of film. From that point on, Arnold was not just a star, he was a phenomenon. The 1980s and early 90s became an era defined by his larger-than-life characters. Films like Commando, Predator, Total Recall, and Terminator 2, Judgment Day did not simply perform well at the box office, they redefined what action movies could be. He blended brute strength with humor, intensity with charm, and near invincibility with just enough vulnerability to make audiences care deeply about his characters. Arnold turned the action genre into a global spectacle, crafting a new style of hero that countless actors would later attempt, and fail, to replicate. His success was not accidental. He studied scripts carefully, chose roles that aligned with his strengths, and consistently worked to improve his on-screen presence. Directors quickly learned that Arnold was reliable, professional, and always willing to push himself for the sake of the film. His work ethic was legendary, and it echoed the discipline he carried from bodybuilding into every arena of his life. By the mid-1990s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was not just an action star. He was the action star, the face of a cinematic revolution that made him one of the most beloved and influential figures in film history. As Arnold's films dominated the box office, his wealth increased at a staggering rate. He became one of the highest-paid actors in the world, commanding salaries that reflected his status as Hollywood royalty. Every new project added millions to his growing empire, and every successful film solidified him as an entertainment powerhouse. But behind the luxurious surface of fame and wealth, Arnold faced challenges that few outsiders ever recognized. Success came with constant pressure. Every movie had to surpass the last, every performance had to meet the expectations of millions, and every public appearance required a level of energy that was increasingly difficult to maintain. The media scrutinized every detail of his life, transforming him from an admired star into a permanent target of public fascination. Each interview, each photograph, and each rumor carried weight, reminding him that privacy had become a luxury he could no longer afford. The physical demands of action films also took a toll on him. He performed many of his own stunts, pushing his body through grueling training and high-intensity filming schedules. Injuries became more frequent, but Arnold continued to work through the pain, determined to deliver the performances audiences expected from him. Behind the confident smile and dramatic on-screen power, he was carrying exhaustion, stress, and an increasing sense of vulnerability. There were also emotional costs. Fame often isolates even the strongest individuals, and Arnold experienced moments of loneliness despite being surrounded by crowds. The expectations placed on him as a global icon created a unique kind of pressure. The pressure to always be strong, always be perfect, and always be the unstoppable figure audiences adored. It became difficult for him to show weakness or express moments of doubt, because the world had come to rely on his image of invincibility. The more successful he became, the more he felt the invisible weight of his public persona. The media sometimes portrayed him as larger than life, but they rarely acknowledged the human complexities behind the star. Arnold was far from invincible in real life. He faced stress, fear, insecurity, and emotional strain just like anyone else, but those struggles remained hidden beneath the armor of fame. As his career reached its peak, he realized that greatness came with a price that few would ever understand. For years, Arnold Schwarzenegger's public image seemed almost untouchable. He was admired not only as a Hollywood icon but as a dedicated father, a devoted husband, and a man who had built a life grounded in discipline and responsibility. Yet in 2011, the world witnessed a revelation that shattered that image and sent shockwaves through the media, his family and millions of people who had looked up to him for decades. The truth emerged that Arnold had fathered a child with a longtime household employee, a secret he had kept hidden for many years. When the story became public, it did not unfold quietly or gradually. It erupted across headlines with a force that felt almost unreal, dragging every detail of his personal life into the harshest spotlight he had ever faced. The emotional fallout within the family was deeper than anything the outside world could see. Maria Shriver, who had stood by his side for 25 years, was suddenly confronted with a betrayal that cut to the core of everything they had built together. Their children, who had grown up admiring their father's strength and integrity, were forced to reconcile the loving man they knew with the painful truth now being dissected by strangers. Arnold later spoke about the moment he confessed, recalling the weight of guilt that had followed him for years and the heartbreak of knowing he had caused the very pain he had spent his life trying to avoid. The media transformed the story into a spectacle, analyzing every angle, speculating on every emotion, and amplifying the scandal to a level that felt almost merciless. Cameras followed him everywhere, commentary flooded every talk show, and people who had once cheered his achievements now questioned his character. It felt as if the world had turned against him overnight. Arnold, who had faced countless challenges throughout his life, suddenly found himself confronted with something far more devastating: the consequences of his own actions and the realization that he had deeply hurt the people who mattered most. The scandal reshaped his life in ways that extended far beyond the headlines. He and Maria separated, eventually filing for divorce, marking the end of a partnership that had anchored him for decades. The home they had built together changed forever, and the sense of security that had surrounded the family fractured into pieces that took years to rebuild. For Arnold, the emotional struggle was immense. He experienced shame, regret, and a profound understanding of how fragile relationships can be when trust is broken. Yet amid the turmoil, he chose to confront his mistake with honesty. He took responsibility publicly, privately, and emotionally, acknowledging the hurt he caused and working to rebuild the bonds with his children. While the world focused on the scandal, Arnold focused on healing. He did not try to erase the truth, nor did he attempt to defend himself with excuses. Instead, he began the slow, painful process of accepting the consequences and learning how to move forward as a father, a public figure, and a man facing the deepest regret of his life. The storm eventually quieted, but its impact remained. It marked one of the most challenging chapters Arnold had ever experienced, a chapter that tested his integrity, his resilience, and his commitment to becoming better. It was a turning point that forced him to confront his own humanity and reshape his life with more humility, honesty, and emotional maturity than ever before. For decades, the world believed Arnold Schwarzenegger was carved from something harder than iron, a man whose will alone could move mountains, whose strength could silence doubt, and whose confidence could smother fear. Yet behind the public image and beneath the armor of fame lived a human being who, like everyone else, battled private storms no camera ever captured. As Arnold entered his later years, the impenetrable giant people admired began to reveal glimpses of fragility. Moments where the man behind the legend quietly confronted the weight of his mistakes, the sting of his regrets, and the emotional toll of a life lived in the blinding heat of global attention. He often spoke in interviews about reflection, about how age has a way of changing the tone of a man's thoughts. In his youth, he chased success like a soldier on a mission, never slowing down long enough to examine the emotional cost. But now, when reporters asked him what he thought about life, he didn't talk about trophies or fame. He talked about forgiveness, about understanding, about how time softens even the strongest hands and forces a man to look inward with a sincerity he once avoided. The world saw it most clearly in the way he spoke, slower, more deliberate, as if each word had been processed through decades of victories and heartbreaks. He admitted that he had done things he wished he hadn't, hurt people he loved, and pushed himself to standards so impossible that even he, the great Arnold, could not bear them without consequence. In his quieter years he realized that his greatest battles were not fought on bodybuilding stages or movie sets but within his own heart. Battles between ambition and responsibility, between pride and vulnerability, between the image the world expected and the man he actually was. His friends often said that Arnold in his 70s was more open than they had ever seen him. He allowed cracks to show, not out of weakness, but out of acceptance, an understanding that true strength is not pretending to be unbreakable but acknowledging that every giant carries scars that no one else sees. And for the first time, the viewers begin to understand that the tragedy surrounding Arnold at 78 is not simply one moment or one event, it's an entire lifetime slowly revealing the human heart beneath the legend. Turning 70 wasn't merely a birthday for Arnold, it was a doorway. A doorway into a life where the past began to speak louder, where old choices returned with sharper clarity, and where his body, once a symbol of invincibility, started whispering truths he could no longer ignore. His health battles, though handled privately, were no secret. Arnold underwent multiple heart surgeries over the years, each one a frightening reminder that even the strongest engines eventually wear down. The man who once lifted impossible weight now faced the heaviest burden of all, mortality. But if there is one thing Arnold never surrendered to, it was defeat. Instead of slowing down, he transformed his lifestyle with the same discipline he once used to build his legendary physique. He changed how he ate, how he trained, how he rested, and how he approached each day. The gym was no longer a battlefield, it became a sanctuary where he moved with intention rather than aggression. Each workout was a promise he made to himself, to live longer, to stay stronger, and to keep inspiring people who looked up to him. In this new chapter, his heart expanded in ways fame could never replicate. He worked tirelessly on repairing relationships that had suffered during the chaos of his earlier life. He made sincere efforts to rebuild trust with his children, spending more time listening, understanding, and showing up in ways he couldn't during his peak career years. And slowly, carefully, those bonds began to heal, becoming stronger and more meaningful than they had ever been. Arnold at 70 was no longer the man obsessed with conquering the world. He became the man who valued quiet moments, who appreciated simple joys, who recognized the importance of human connection. And as he aged, the world watched a transformation that in many ways was even more inspiring than his bodybuilding victories. They watched a man grow, not in muscle, not in fame, but in heart. At 78, Arnold Schwarzenegger lives a life far quieter than the world imagines. His mornings begin early, just as they always did, but the rhythm has changed. Instead of the high-intensity training sessions that once pushed the limits of human endurance, he now embraces controlled movements, stretching, long walks, and a pace that reflects both wisdom and necessity. His animals, his beloved dogs, donkey and miniature horse, follow him around the house, bringing a softness to his days that he never expected to cherish so deeply. There are activities he no longer approaches with the same confidence as before. Tasks that once felt effortless now require patience, caution, and acceptance. His body, sculpted through decades of discipline, bears the marks of surgeries, injuries, and time itself. He still works out, still keeps himself strong, but he recognizes limits he once refused to acknowledge. And while this change may appear small to outsiders, to a man who built a career on strength, it carries a profound emotional weight. Close friends say Arnold has become more contemplative than ever. He speaks about life with an emotional honesty that surprises even those who've known him for decades. He talks about mortality, about the reality of growing older, and about the quiet fear that sometimes creeps into his heart, the fear of time slipping faster than he can hold on to it. He often sits on his patio in the late afternoon, looking out over his property with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, reflecting on the years behind him and the uncertain horizon ahead. Conversations with loved ones have taken on a deeper meaning. He listens more, interrupts less, and tries hard to be present in ways he once struggled with during his years of fame and responsibility. The man who spent a lifetime being larger than life now values the small, intimate moments that fame could never provide. And yet behind all these peaceful details lies something heavier, a quiet tragedy, a weight in his voice, a shadow in his eyes. Something viewers will only understand fully when the video reaches its final chapters. Arnold Schwarzenegger's career is not simply a series of blockbuster titles. It is a cultural blueprint that reshaped Hollywood and influenced how generations perceive strength, courage, and resilience. The moment he stepped onto the screen as Conan, audiences knew they were witnessing something entirely new. He didn't just play a hero, he embodied one. His presence was a force that made the impossible feel real, a type of cinematic dominance rarely seen in the decades before or since. His films had a quality that transcended their plots. The Terminator introduced a character so iconic that it permanently altered science fiction cinema. Predator, Total Recall, Commando, True Lies. These weren't merely action films. They became the backbone of a new cinematic era, one defined by characters who combined brute strength with sharp intelligence and unmistakable charisma. When Arnold delivered a line, it wasn't just dialogue. People repeated it, mimicked it, built jokes, memories, and entire identities around it. Few actors in history have created so many catchphrases that became part of global pop culture. But behind the glamour and the cheers were sacrifices the audience never saw. To maintain his image, Arnold lived with an intensity not many could endure. He committed countless hours to physical training while juggling movies, business ventures, and a public life where even the smallest slip made headlines. He faced doubters throughout his transition from athlete to actor, then actor to politician, proving again and again that his greatest strength was not his physique but his relentless will. What people call the Arnold Empire grew from this drive: real estate investments, fitness companies, restaurants, production studios, global fitness events, and a legacy that stretched far beyond the screen. His movies changed Hollywood, but his mindset changed the world. He proved that greatness is built, not inherited, and that even a boy from a small Austrian village could redefine what a global superstar looked like. And yet, even with all the accolades and all the victories, the empire came at a cost. There were moments when he found himself alone in hotel rooms after long shoots, wondering if the world loved him for who he truly was or for the figure he presented on screen. These quiet moments shaped the emotional depth we now see in Arnold, especially at 78. A man who built an empire yet still carries the weight of what he lost along the way. To the outside world, Arnold Schwarzenegger always seemed unstoppable. His smile, bright and unshakable, became his trademark, a symbol of confidence that reassured fans he was forever in control. But those who knew him closely understood a deeper truth. Behind that famous smile lived a man who carried emotional wounds that time had not fully healed, and burdens heavy enough to bend even the strongest shoulders. Arnold's life was built on discipline, resilience, and the refusal to show weakness, yet this same foundation made it difficult for him to share his pain. He grew up in an environment where emotions were often dismissed, where vulnerability was seen as failure, and these childhood lessons clung to him long into adulthood. The world applauded his strength, but it rarely paused long enough to question what it cost him to maintain it. Friends revealed that Arnold often avoided discussing his deeper feelings, not because he lacked them, but because he didn't quite know how to express the weight inside his heart. He was a man accustomed to pushing through hardship, not sitting with it. But the older he grew, the harder it became to outrun the emotional shadows of his past. Regret, loss, and unresolved pain sometimes crept in during quiet evenings when the cameras were off and the world no longer demanded his attention. There were conversations, intimate and honest, that he shared only with those he trusted most. Moments where he admitted fears he once considered unthinkable. He spoke about relationships he wished he handled differently, about people he hurt unintentionally, and about dreams he achieved at the cost of moments he could never reclaim. He confessed that fame often magnified his mistakes and hid his humanity, leaving him with guilt that cut deeper than any public criticism. And yet, among all these private struggles, one truth echoed most painfully: Arnold often felt misunderstood, even by those who admired him. People saw the muscles, the awards, the political victories, but they didn't see the loneliness that sometimes followed him home. They didn't see the nights when he sat alone, wrestling with memories he couldn't escape. They didn't see the weight of expectations that grew heavier with each passing year. The world celebrated his triumphs, but behind the smile lived a man who was still learning how to heal. Reaching 78 brought Arnold to a stage of life where reflection became not an occasional thought but a constant companion. He often found himself replaying moments from decades earlier. Moments in which he had to choose between ambition and presence, between greatness and simplicity, between chasing dreams and protecting relationships that mattered more than he realized at the time. In interviews and private conversations, Arnold admitted to carrying regrets. Real, heavy regrets that he wished he could rewrite. He wished he had slowed down more often, embraced the quiet moments, and allowed himself to be vulnerable with the people who needed him most. He wished he had listened more than he spoke, and paused long enough to understand what his loved ones felt but never expressed. These reflections were not confessions of failure but acknowledgments of the complexity of a life lived at full speed. He recognized that the very traits that brought him success, his discipline, his obsession, his unwavering focus, also created distance between him and the people he cherished. He spent years climbing towering peaks of achievement, only to discover later that the view from the top sometimes felt lonely. He spoke openly about this loneliness, explaining that success without balance had its own price. There were sacrifices along the way, sacrifices he didn't fully understand until age forced him to slow down and confront what he had missed. Arnold also reflected on the choices he made under the pressures of fame. He admitted that there were times when he chased the world's approval instead of following his own heart. Times when he felt trapped by the image the world expected him to maintain. Times when he wished he had stepped back instead of pushing forward. Yet even with these regrets, Arnold carried an intense sense of gratitude. He recognized that his life, filled with extraordinary highs and painful lows, shaped him into a man he could finally understand. He no longer saw himself through the lens of perfection that Hollywood once demanded. He saw himself as human, flawed, resilient, growing, and learning even at 78. If Arnold Schwarzenegger's journey has moved you, if his strength, his vulnerability, and his unbreakable willpower have touched something deep within your heart, then we invite you to stay with us as we continue sharing the powerful, untold stories behind the world's most iconic figures.